Work and Pensions Secretary is with us this morning, Mel Stride. Of course, you're here more often than I am at the moment.
Good morning. Well, it's a pleasure to be at your bar with your finest water.
Yeah, Don't tell anybody it's vodka, will you? Straight vodka. Let's talk about this £2,000, shall we? How did you come to this assertion that the Labour plans would lead to a tax rise equivalent of £2,000 per family? Where did that come from?
So you take the commitments that they have come forward with, that we expect now to appear in their manifesto, you add up the amount of each one of those commitments over the period of what's called the scorecard, or basically the next Parliament. You subtract the revenue raises that they have said they are going to bring into effect, and you take the net difference, and that is £38.5 billion. That is your black hole of unfunded commitments. You divide it by about 15 million working, working households, and that's where you get a figure that's just over £2,000. So that's the additional tax burden on working households that Labour in government would lead to.
Let's go through it. The Statistics Watchdog says it's looking into Rishi Sunak's claim over those tax costs. You're going to stand by them, even though they're saying they're looking into them?
Well, the UK Statistics Authority has a role which involves looking at all sorts of statistics and coming to conclusions.
OK.
And,
so that's a yes.
I don't read anything into that.
OK.
Yeah, no, I stand by the numbers.
And what about the top Treasury civil servant writing? We've seen in the letter, they made it public yesterday, saying your claims shouldn't be presented as having been produced by the civil service.
Well, he's right in as much as the overall report, of course, as I've described, we are the people that have added up the numbers and divided by the 15 million and come up with the additional tax that Labour would be charging. And we've never said that the Treasury has done that. But what we have said, and it is the case, is that a substantial majority of those items within that report are actually a result of Treasury analysis. Now, the report itself is very clear on all of this, absolutely crystal clear as to where the evidence is for each one thing, and it's very cautious on those numbers. So the biggest number, Kay, is the Green Prosperity Fund, so-called, which Labour have costed at about 23 billion across 5 years. We took, because there's a general election in this year, just 4 years' worth of that. So we've got about 18 billion in.
Well, Keir Starmer...
So we've been very cautious.
OK.
And what they've got to do, Kate, is they've got to focus on the substance, Labour. They've got to answer the question, where are the errors
Labour what they're doing,
and what we're saying?
If you're coming up with these figures, you've got to be sure. And Keir Starmer says that Rishi Sunak has broken the ministerial code by deliberately lying over these figures.
Well, that is utterly wrong.
You guys are just doubling down, aren't you? Everyone's against you. You're doubling down
we're standing. We've always had the same position on this, and I've talked you through how we arrived at those numbers. I've stressed the fact that they are relatively conservative estimates with a small c. This is nothing new, Kay. In fact, if you go back decades, this kind of process is a feature of general elections. Alistair Darling, then Labour Chancellor in 2010, carried out a very similar exercise. What's driving the animus of Keir Starmer and his colleagues is they know there are questions to be answered.
Well, I've got another question for you.
If they can talk about throwing the smoke around, they can avoid dealing with the numbers, which are staring them in the face.
I don't know if you've seen our economics editor, Ed Conway, has looked into the data. He's very clever at it. And he found that since 2019, we've all experienced £13,000 of extras in taxes if we were to add things up the same way that you've added things up for Labour. So, in other words, the Tories have cost us an extra £13,000. There you go, it's on the screen. £13,000 extra in taxes since the last election.
So what has happened, Kate,
it's a lot more than
is that this country... Just hear me out for a second.
It's a lot more than 2,000. I think we can agree on that.
This is important, yes, but it's another number that, out of context that I haven't had a chance to properly look at. But let me make a general point, which is important, because I don't follow Ed Conway's every single pronouncement.
Well, you should, I think.
And probably I will do after this programme.
Yeah, I think you should.
But let me make this point. So this country has been through two once-in-a-generation, once-in-a-century external events. One was the COVID crisis that shrank the economy by 10% overnight. The other is the war in Ukraine that spiked inflation up to over 11%. We supported the economy. If you go back to COVID, through furlough, millions of jobs, all that unemployment that never happened because Rishi Sunak did the right thing. And we also supported people through those cost of living pressures with inflation. That totaled £400 billion worth of support. And I think most of your viewers would think it wasn't unreasonable for us to have to pay that down. So we have seen some tax increases, but the trajectory now, Kay, is downward.
£13,000
let's talk about what's happening now and what's going to happen going forward. So we've had a one-third cut in national insurance for 29 million people, worth £900 for an average earner. On pensions, we brought in we will bring in, if we're elected, the triple lock plus, which will keep pensioners out of income tax. Unlike Labour, who will not do that, and under Labour, you will see millions of pensioners paying income tax on their state pension for the first time, and we don't think that's right.
You don't... £13,000 extra in taxes, I mean, that is an actual fact. You don't even have the support, it would appear now, of The Spectator. I was surprised, shall we say, yesterday to see the editor of The Spectator saying there are serious issues at stake in this general election, and the Tories have just released nonsense figures with fake attribution and given it to newspapers who took it on trust. I'm really not sure that this will help their chances very much. You're in a lot of trouble when your Bible turns against you.
So I've already dealt with the numbers in the report that we produced.
So in terms of wrong.
What matters, Kay, in this election is who should get the keys to number 10. Is it going to be the party which has taken us through all those extreme difficulties, that has now got inflation down from over 11% to 2%, has got real wages growing in each of the last 10 months.
Even your Bible
is putting
says
up the national living
figures.
wage to look after those at the lower end of the earnings distribution and so on? Or is it a party that has no plan and is basically going to take us back to square? You saw that in the debates. What does Keir Starmer stand for? I still don't know.
Let's not talk about Keir Starmer. Let's talk about
this
your
election
bloke.
is a choice.
And
it's a choice.
even The Spectator is saying nonsense figures with fake attribution.
Well, I've dealt with that. I do not accept that we have in any way misrepresented those numbers. If you read that report, the Chancellor provides a forward to it. The point is made very clearly that these are our computations, but they are based on information which, in large part, the majority of which has been a result of Treasury analysis.
I've got more figures for you.
I know that there are different ways of presenting that, and Labour will do so.
Here we go.
But they've got to deal with the answer. What do you do about the £38.5 billion black hole?
Reform is polling just 2 points behind you in the latest YouGov poll. That must send a shudder down your spine.
It's not over yet, Kate. We've got 4 weeks to the general election, and the only poll that matters is the general election. Now, you laughed the last time I said it, but it happens to be true. You'd have laughed when Theresa May was way ahead in those polls at this stage of the election, and it all changed very rapidly. Yeah. The poll that matters is what happens on election day. A vote for reform is a vote for the Labour Party, OK? So any viewer listening needs to know that Reform are not going to be winning seats under the first-past-the-post electoral system. It simply won't happen. This is, I think, the 8th time that Nigel Farage, for example, has been standing for Parliament, and each time he's not succeeded.
That is true.
So, as a result, the conclusion has to be that if you are Conservative-leaning and you vote for Reform, you will let Keir Starmer in with an open-door immigration policy, with no ideas on the economy, with all the hard work and sacrifice that we've put in to get to where we are now, with a better future ahead of us, greater financial security, growth going, real wages rising. All of that's going to disappear.
You're shouting that in the wind, it would appear, because no one's listening to you anymore. I saw that latest poll suggesting that you were going to be absolutely wiped out, and even you, with a majority of 17,300, would lose your seat if it came to pass.
Kay,
How worried are you?
I have fought. I've had majorities of anything from about 10 to 21,500, and every single election I fight it the same. I fight for every single vote. I have great pride in the fact that I've stood up for my constituents over many years on many issues. I hope that will be reflected in the result, but we will wait and see.
What job will you do?
I will fight for every single vote.
What job will you do if you lose your seat?
Well, I'm not going to speculate about that, and I'm not yet thinking in those terms at all. Well, I had a background in business, and I think...
We could write your CV now if you...
Well, that's an incredibly generous offer of you, Kay Burley, but not required, I'm afraid. Service is not needed.
OK, it's good to see you as always.
Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed for joining us.